consider the image before you and what it is saying. So, on one level, they are shaking hands, they're coming together. But on another level, they both chose to hide behind a mask. They're hiding something. And so you can ask yourself, is this a encounter where you expect perfect communication to occur, perfect trust? Not when there's this barrier that they're both choosing to place before each other. And that somewhat symbolizes the idea of the split mind in A Course in Miracles, where on one level there seems to be a communication, okay, let's be friends, but privately and within one's own mind, there's an entirely different story going on. So hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader for this session is Julie.
Beyond the poor attraction of the special love relationship, and always obscured by it, is the powerful attraction of the Father for his Son. There is no other love that can satisfy you, because there is no other love. This is the only love that is fully given and fully returned. Being complete, it asks nothing. Being wholly pure, everyone joined in it has everything. This is not the basis for any relationship in which the ego enters. For every relationship on which the ego embarks is special. The ego establishes relationships only to get something, and it would keep the giver bound to itself through guilt. It is impossible for the ego to enter into any relationship without anger, for the ego believes that anger makes friends. This is not a statement, but it is its purpose. For the ego really believes that it can get and keep by making guilty. This is its one attraction, an attraction so weak that it would have no hold at all, except that no one recognizes it. For the ego always seems to attract through love and has no attraction at all to anyone who perceives that it attracts through guilt.
Mm-hmm. So there's a major theme here, which is the contrast for how the ego enters, the basis for the ego to relate to others. And that, of course, contrasts with how the holy relationship, the Holy Spirit, the basis for entering into a relationship. This session will focus largely on how the ego, the tools it uses, the approaches, the foundation that it has for relationships. As it says here, oh, wait a minute, where is it? Oh, well, says somewhere in here that no one suspects what the ego, that no one would recognize it. This is the one attraction is guilt. And it's not a strong attraction, but no one recognizes that the ego uses guilt as the basis for its relationships. And so the whole purpose of this reading is to bring that which is unrecognized into consciousness so you can see it, It'll be judged from the Holy Spirit's perspective. You can see it and join the Holy Spirit in that judgment and then say, I don't want anything to do with that kind of relating. And so we're going to point out again and again what manner that is that the ego uses. Um, every relationship the ego embarks on is special. It tries to separate out a relationship from all the others and make it unique and then tell stories about all that. Always the ego is attempting to get something from the other person. Stronger way of saying that is to use the other for a purpose that the ego has, so that other people become like objects, and that relationship is bound around guilt, and as we shall see, a sense of sacrifice. We'll get into that more as we go. And this in a relationship based on guilt and sacrifice is bound to stir up anger. So you can see all the emotional context that comes along with that. And the ego, from the ego's perspective, it really is best to exercise guilt in a relationship. Um, and yet, despite all that, remember we said it's unrecognized, all that, the ego always seems to attract through love. Just like in our first picture where they're shaking hands, the ego would seem to put on an appearance of agreeableness, but it actually has, that's a false front or a projection.
The sick attraction of guilt must be recognized for what it is. For having been made real to you, it is essential to look at it clearly and by withdrawing your investment in it, to learn to let it go. No one would choose to let go what he believes has value. Yet the attraction of guilt has value to you only because you have not looked at what it is and have judged it completely in the dark. As we bring it to light, your only question will be why it was you ever wanted it. You have nothing to lose by looking open-eyed for ugliness, such as this belongs not in your holy mind. This host of God can have no real investment here.
Mm-hmm. This paragraph, in many ways, summarizes the method used throughout the textbook, which is that if you never look at these issues that we're reading about, they would seem to have value. In the case of guilt, seems to have value. Why? Because we've never really looked at it, never really considered at this level of examination what it is. And therefore, our view of it we've arrived at some view in the dark. We've judged it in the dark. So we don't know what we're talking about, is what we're saying. We've judged it in the dark by not really know what we're dealing with. And so throughout the textbook, we bring that issue, unexamined, unquestioned aspects of the ego into the light. And from that perspective, the light of the Holy Spirit, the truth that the Holy Spirit shines on it, you're going to wonder why you ever had lived your life according to these ego foundations. And you'll want to make another choice. That's the whole point of it, is to motivate you to want to choose again. Julie?
Thanks, Jonica. What had been really difficult for me in the beginning was that the course asked me to look at words that I had been using for decades and to be willing to change how I define them as how the course defined them. Love is one, special is one, knowledge is one, and not so much the meaning, but that there was ever any inherent in value in sacrifice and that that equaled something related to love. Thanks.
Yeah, it's so true. Thank you, Julie. It's so true. The symbolism, because these are words, they're symbols. And I've often said that it is my assertion that every word in the Course of Miracles, the ego has connotations or meaning that it would, and we're all familiar with them because they're widely used in the world. Every symbol and the Holy Spirit has those same symbols, but gives an entirely different meaning to it. And many miracle students initially get hung up on that because it's a cognitive dissonance. We're talking about something we thought we already understood, and when it's being used in two different ways, it creates a sort of dissonance. I don't really understand what they're talking about. Paul?
Um, Thanks, Jonica. Just following up on what Julie just said, could you elaborate on the way the Course views guilt?
Yeah, it's a deep um, issue, Paul. People outside of the course will often think of personal guilt, something that I did that maybe I have shame around, or someone else did to me, and we define guilt in that context. Whereas the course views it as an existential matter, and the foundation of guilt there, Paul, begins where the separation began. And so one version of the story is we were all united together in one creation, perfect harmony, peace, and love. And the thought occurred to us, let's get out of here and go do something else. Kind of sneak out from the crowd and be separate. And that's the beginning of the separation. And we feel guilty about leaving the sonship, about leaving the union, about going our own separate way. We feel like we've betrayed the creator. In many ways, the parable, the prodigal son, where the son leaves his home, is a reenactment of that type of guilt. And one more thing I'll say, because of the nature of that kind of guilt, it tends to largely be unconscious, subconscious. Very few people are really able to recognize that without the help of Course in Miracles. So the Course tells you about guilt that you never knew you had. Identifies guilt you never thought you had. Heidi?
So, are you saying that if I start going to the Holy Spirit and letting go of my guilt for creating my ego, that my body guilt is going to go away? Is that the way to get rid of your body guilt?
Well, you're using a term I'm not sure you're meaning body guilt, but
Ego guilt.
ego guilt. What I'm saying is there is this deep barrier in our minds. Heidi, picture it this way. If you were to walk down a path and in front of you was this heavenly being of light and love and glory, and they called to you, come, Heidi, join me. One of the things that has to be relieved is all of our doubts about ourselves, all of our past judgments about not only ourselves, but about everyone else, all those things that we used our mind for that were clearly not holy, all that winds up giving us a feeling which the Course calls guilt, but it doesn't belong in heaven. It's not a part of perfect love, and we feel guilty because we've participated in it. So stay tuned. We'll continue to elaborate on this. By the way, we need to go on, but I will tell you, there were years I read the Course of Miracles. I had no idea what the guilt was talking about. And I'm being honest here. I thought maybe on some superficial level that I understood. I had no idea. I was one, hasn't it already said twice tonight that we don't know what it is, only because you've not looked at it. And on the previous section said because we haven't recognized it. This is an unrecognized barrier hidden in our mind that makes us think of ourselves and everyone else as unworthy of perfect love. Guilt is the thing that the lie that stands between our letting perfect love in and seeing ourselves as full of perfect love. Susie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it was a very difficult concept for me. Do you remember, Jonica, like years ago, we had a whole conversation. I kept asking you to try to define for me what guilt was. What is guilt? What do they mean by guilt? What do they mean by guilt? And you know what? I just now I say all the stuff in my mind that I've made up and judgments and all that stuff, I just put it in one big package, like all the blocks to love's awareness, and it's all going on in here.
Yeah.
And I think the Course just uses that word.
Yes.
You know, because it was very hard for me to reconcile. What does that mean? And through the years, it just kind of means that to me. It's just the whole big pile of stuff.
Yep. That's a really good point. Thank you, Susie. And I want to build one more thing on there. It would be a mistake for you to think about guilt as being guilt for a specific thing, like I stole the cookies, or I didn't show up for my wedding, or something like that. Some specific date and time and place, and that's where my guilt is. Guilt is, as Susie said, this one big basket of feelings, all of which are somewhat troubled and ill at ease with oneself. Guilt is the umbrella term for all of that. All right, we need to go on because, as we said, this will take a while to truly understand guilt. Hi, Kitty.
We said before that the ego attempts to maintain and increase guilt, but in such a way that you do not recognize what it would do to you. For it is the ego's fundamental doctrine that what you do to others, you have escaped. The ego wishes no one well, yet its survival depends on your belief that you are exempt from its evil intentions. It counsels, therefore, that if you are host to it, It will enable you to direct its anger outward, thus protecting you. And thus it embarks on an endless, unrewarding chain of special relationships, forged out of anger and dedicated to but one insane belief, that the more anger you invest outside yourself, the safer you become.
So in summary, this guilt is uncomfortable to look at, and so the ego projects it outward onto others. That is its technique. And I want to cite one thing that I encountered through someone that worked for years in prison ministry. And these were people that are doing 15 years, 20 years, or a lifetime in prison. And he said, almost without fail, every one of them would tell a story of how they really weren't guilty of what they were in prison for. They all felt themselves to be innocent, that they were unjustly accused. Well, the ego projects the guilt outward onto others. This is fundamental doctrine that what you do to others, you have escaped. You pin the guilt externally rather than internally. And can you see how, with that arrangement, you can go on in life and live, you can continue to practice guilt and tolerate it because it's viewed as outside of you, not as a part of you. Again, the ego attempts to maintain and increase guilt in such a way that you do not recognize what it would do to you. It would have you spend a lifetime of believing that there's plenty of guilty people out there and they deserve what they get, but not me. I'm not the one. Go on.
It is this chain that binds the Son of God to guilt, and it is this chain the Holy Spirit would remove from his holy mind. For the chain of savagery belongs not around the chosen host of God, who cannot make himself host to the ego. In the name of his release, and in the name of him who would release him, let us look more closely at the relationships the ego contrives, and let the Holy Spirit judge them truly. For it is certain that if you will look at them, you will offer them gladly to him. What he can make of them you do not know, but you will become willing to find out if you are willing first to perceive what you have made of them.
Okay, so this is how the Course recommends we heal. There is this phenomenon that we've been unconscious of, blind to, where we were carrying the chain of guilt throughout our entire life, pointing fingers outward and paying a price for that. And we heal by being willing to look more closely at how the ego has contrived this guilt and made it as a part of the way we relate ourselves to others. And so that is it. We're, again, bring it out into the light. Let's look at it, because once you see what it is, then you can make a rational choice about whether or not you want to continue to invest your life in carrying the chains of guilt or not. Offer them gladly to the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit has a plan. Holy Spirit's done this for billions of people already. This is not new. All it requires is you are willing first to perceive what you have made of your relationships using guilt and sacrifice as a foundation?
In one way or another, every relationship the ego makes is based on the idea that by sacrificing itself, it becomes bigger. The sacrifice, which it regards as purification, is actually the root of its bitter resentment. For it would prefer to attack directly and avoid delaying what it really wants. Yet the ego acknowledges reality as it sees it and recognizes that no one could interpret direct attack as love. Yet to make guilty is direct attack, although it does not seem to be. For the guilty expect attack, and having asked for it, they are attracted to it. In such insane relationships, the attraction of what you do not want seems to be much stronger than the attraction of what you do want.
Mm-hmm.
For each one thinks that he has sacrificed something to the other and hates him for it. Yet this is what he thinks he wants. He is not in love with the other at all. He merely believes he is in love with sacrifice. And for this sacrifice, which he demands of himself, he demands that the other accept the guilt and sacrifice himself as well. Forgiveness becomes impossible, for the ego believes that to forgive another is to lose him. It is only by attack without forgiveness that the ego can ensure the guilt that holds all its relationships together.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's try to summarize in a few words what we're saying. We're talking about relationships based on an insane premise where guilt and a sense of sacrifice, where I'm doing this for the good of the family, the relationships. And I'm going to cite a few examples that I've seen in movies and in real life that I'm sure you'll recognize right away. And say, so married couple shows up in many formats, but the mother-in-law is going to come and stay for a while at the house. And that's viewed by the opposite, by one of the members as a real penalty, something we really don't want, but we'll sacrifice our time and our energy to be nice in order to accommodate here. But truly, if the truth be known, that's the mask that we'll wear. But if the truth be known, we'd rather not, the mother-in-law would not visit at all. The same thing can be said. Do we have to go to your parents for Thanksgiving this year? Or do we have to spend this time with your relatives? It shows up that way. And it had one other, I'm sure you can cite examples as well. And that it's not the point to list out all the forms in which, I know. The couple would really rather divorce, but there's children, and so they sacrifice themselves for the good of the children. Or in other words, they tolerate living together in the belief that that's what's best for their children. So they make so this is a belief that love is a sacrifice. That in order to love, you have to give up something, a part of yourself, and put up with, tolerate things that you would never tolerate outside of the love relationship. You would just say no. So those are just a few quick examples. And what the statement is here is that the ego is doing this all the time. As the basis of the premise of its insane relationships is that it will have this largely unconscious, unexamined guilt, and a feeling is I'm doing this for the good of the family or for the good of others. This is not really what I want. I'm sacrificing myself for some other cause. And all this results in, can you understand how resentment and a deep-seated anger could build up with such a basis in relationships? Well, of course. Um, so each one thinks he has sacrificed something to the other, in the Course using strong language, and hates him for it. He's not in love with the other at all. He merely believes he is in love with sacrifice. So we'll move on. We're just skimming over this quickly. There are many life examples. The bigger theme is that these are tools the ego uses, and it's very good at it. And we are very unaccustomed to looking at them, very blind to it. Although I went out on the internet and found plenty of examples of love is sacrifice. That was the theme. That was what was being taught in the broad population, that to love is to sacrifice yourself. This is the opposite of what the Course is going to affirm.
Yet they only seem to be together. For relationships to the ego mean only that bodies are together. It is always this that the ego demands, and it does not object where the mind goes or what it thinks, for this seems unimportant. As long as the body is there to receive its sacrifice, it is content. To the ego, the mind is private, and only the body can be shared. Ideas are basically of no concern, except as they bring the body of another closer or farther. And it is in these terms that it evaluates ideas as good or bad. What makes another guilty and holds him through guilt is good. What releases him from guilt is bad, because he would no longer believe that bodies communicate, and so he would be gone.
So this is a classic example of level confusion. So let's bring the bodies together, but keep our thoughts private and apart, secret and hidden. It's the essence of that is the goal of the ego. As long as the bodies are together, as long as the couple is living in the same household together, it doesn't matter that their love has long since ceased. They still have the appearance to their neighbors and others externally of having a marriage of some sort. Again, just to cite one example. So it's all part of the ego, just as the ego would keep guilt hidden from you. The ego also believes that the mind is private and that the mind can be hidden from everyone else. We'll find, of course, the Holy Spirit does not believe that at all. It's just the opposite.
Suffering and sacrifice are the gifts with which the ego would bless all unions. And those who are united at its altar accept suffering and sacrifice as the price of union. In their angry alliances, born of the fear of loneliness, and yet dedicated to the continuance of loneliness, each seeks relief from guilt by increasing it in the other. For each believes that this decreases guilt in him. The other seems always to be attacking and wounding him, perhaps in little ways, perhaps unconsciously, yet never without demand of sacrifice. The fury of those joined at the ego's altar far exceeds your awareness of it. for what the ego really wants you do not realize.
So again, just to take this out, to illustrate examples in a marriage where love has long since left the marriage, but they still cohabitate and increasingly resent each other and argue constantly, fighting, angry, venting out their anger towards one another. The fury of those joined at the ego's altar far exceeds your awareness of it. And we know how emotional abuse, physical, psychological abuse can be practiced inside a home. And there certainly are reports where that can even result in extreme violence. These are, but now, I'm not saying that it always appears in that extreme manner. I'm just illustrating how, in the context of a relationship, this insanity goes on. And I didn't think to mention this, but John Bradshaw on the Family in the 1980s came out on PBS and did a series where he started talking about things that happen in behind closed doors in families. And I still remember how shocked I was. I had no idea. He would just go through the litany of all the fury and hatred, things that people did to one another inside their own home. And the ego would have you think all that to be normal.
Whenever you are angry, you can be sure that you have formed a special relationship which the ego has blessed, for anger is its blessing. Anger takes many forms, but it cannot long deceive those who will learn that love brings no guilt at all, and what brings guilt cannot be love and must be anger. All anger is nothing more than an attempt to make someone feel guilty, and this attempt is the only basis the ego accepts for special relationships. Guilt is the only need the ego has. And as long as you identify with it, guilt will remain attractive to you. Yet remember this: to be with a body is not communication. And if you think it is, you will feel guilty about communication and will be afraid to hear the Holy Spirit, recognizing in His voice your own need to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what brings guilt cannot be love and must be anger. They're related, guilt and anger. Guilt is the only need the ego has. And the ego wants you to feel like a drug that's destroying you, or I'll say an addiction that is destroying you. The ego will cause you to feel like you need to keep perpetuating that guilt, that there's something in it that draws you into that, a type of fatal attraction, perhaps even in the form of the movie. And so all of this is like a shield, a defensive shield that the ego uses to block your awareness of the Holy Spirit and your awareness of love. These are psychological mechanisms. These are responses to life situations, to relationships in particular, that appear in your mind as a sick way of responding in relationships, and they are antithetical to the Holy Spirit, you will be afraid to hear the Holy Spirit when you embrace those thoughts. And you will be afraid to acknowledge that the attraction you have for the love of the Holy Spirit is where your true identity really belongs. You'll feel this goes back, Heidi, to what we mentioned about guilt. You'll feel unworthy of the love and blessing of the Holy Spirit. Why? Because of a fatal attraction to this mechanism of the ego for relating to people using these shields of guilt and anger. Again, we're not saying that the mind is fully conscious of doing these things. We're saying that we have largely subconscious response mechanisms that operate, that keep us from opening our heart and soul more fully in relationships. Julie?
Hi, Jonica. I won't make this long. In the family that I grew up in, we had labels for this kind of behavior. It was called dedication or commitment or loyalty.
That's surprising. Can you elaborate a little more?
Yeah. If you loved me, you would do what looks like sacrifice, and you wouldn't think that that was out of the ordinary. If you were loyal, you would do this thing that might hurt a little bit, but if you were dedicated enough, how else do you show someone how much you care?
Exactly. I get it. Thank you. Yeah. You'd be willing to pay the price for me if you loved me. Again, love is a sacrifice. Yeah, thank you. It is all pervasive. It has, John Bradshaw was correct. It's in the family system of origin, and it's passed down through generations until someone breaks the cycle. And until we, to use Bradshaw's slogan, heal the pain that binds us. Until we're willing. Well, in this case, the Course is identifying the pain that binds us in a very specific set of tactics that are used. All right, we'll go on.
The Holy Spirit cannot teach through fear. And how can he communicate with you while you believe that to communicate is to make yourself alone? It is clearly insane to believe that by communicating, you will be abandoned. And yet many do believe it, for they think their minds must be kept private or they will lose them. But if their bodies are together, their minds remain their own. The union of bodies thus becomes the way in which they would keep minds apart. For bodies cannot forgive. They can only do as the mind directs.
Mm-hmm. So in these last few paragraphs, the emphasis, we're going to bleed in, shift with some more attention towards how the Holy Spirit would draw us out of this egoic mode of relating. And that's going to be the basis for the whole next chapter. But we're introducing the idea, I call it Holy Spirit to the rescue. We've just looked at the sick problem. John, however you understand it, we're exposing it. And now it's like, well, what are we going to do? Holy Spirit comes to the rescue. She's got a solution. And just like in our original image that was holding the mask up, we're going to unmask the ego. We're going to stop the hiding, stop the barriers here, and be more transparent, be more open minded, both towards the Holy Spirit as well as towards others. And this is summarized. The symbol they use is we're going to communicate authentically. I'm using the word authentically, but the Course calls it we're going to communicate the truth to the Holy Spirit, to ourselves, and to others. And so, and just we'll summarize all that is perfect communication. That would be on the far end of the spectrum. But we're going to begin communicating more clearly with the Holy Spirit and with our own self. Because what will happen as you begin to heal here is your own experiences with this anger and guilt and sacrifice. Those memories will arise in your mind as you're starting to heal. It'll kind of replay and you'll see, oh my, but now you look at it from this new perspective and say, oh my, there I participated in that. And that's a chance to not feel guilty about your past being that way, but instead to give that over to the Holy Spirit and say, I don't know how you're going to heal me, Holy Spirit, but help me heal from this. Help me not to perpetuate that again in my life. Help me to heal from the pain that binds me. And so, and know that the Holy Spirit has vast resources available to her, including all the angels, to help you with that.
The illusion of the autonomy of the body and its ability to overcome loneliness is but the working of the ego's plan to establish its own autonomy. As long as you believe that to be with a body is companionship, you will be compelled to attempt to keep your brother in his body, held there by guilt. And you will see safety in guilt and danger in communication. For the ego will always teach that loneliness is solved by guilt and that communication is the cause of loneliness. And despite the evident insanity of this lesson, many have learned it. Forgiveness lies in communication as surely as damnation lies in guilt. It is the Holy Spirit's teaching function to instruct those who believe communication to be damnation that communication is salvation, and he will do so for the power of God in him and you is joined in a real relationship, so holy and so strong that it can overcome even this without fear.
Mm-hmm. So, wow, it's deeper here. The solution of how to heal from this pain that keeps us bound in unhealthy relationships comes from the Holy Spirit. So it's not something that we're well familiar with. We have to acquire, as Julie said, a new language, a new way of understanding terms that we've used before. We have to learn this new way of looking at we have to be willing to look at what was in the past and see it for what it is, let it go, and then learn the new way that's being taught by the Holy Spirit. The ego's way, and the way that we probably acquired, is to believe as long as the person was nearby physically, like in the same room, the same bed, the same table, whatever, that's all that was necessary. It'd be like in my um, example of a loveless marriage, where as long as they're still cohabitating, then they've satisfied the condition of appearances there. As long as the body is a companion. For that's all that matters to the ego. Minds are intended to be private. And so into that foundation, ego foundation, the Holy Spirit introduces the idea of holy communication. And the holy instant, the holy encounter, the holy relationships are all going to be a part of that holy communication. Um, and for you will find of all the ways in which you can learn what true forgiveness is, holy communication, you will find it there. As a matter of fact, yeah, it's true for me. Maybe 15 years of reading the Course in Miracles, I had some notion of what forgiveness meant. And but I had more of I had read about it, so it must be the way I understood what I read notion. And I would say the truth is that in holy communication, you experience forgiveness because you encounter the other person as your holy equal. A holy encounter is an encounter with another who is your holy equal, and it has a qualitatively different experience than any other type of encountering. So forgiveness lies in communication. This is where what we will call being joined in a real relationship, so holy and so strong. This will be the basis going forward of of practicing the holy instant so that we have real relationships. And when we say real, we mean, yes, we mean authentic, transparent, but we mean holy encounters. Real relationships are based on holy encounters where forgiveness is natural.
It is through the holy instant that what seems impossible is accomplished, making it evident that it is not impossible. In the holy instant, guilt holds no attraction, since communication has been restored. And guilt, whose only purpose is to disrupt communication, has no function here. Here there is no concealment and no private thoughts. The willingness to communicate attracts communication to it and overcomes loneliness completely. There is complete forgiveness here, for there is no desire to exclude anyone from your completion and sudden recognition of the value of his part in it. In the protection of your wholeness, all are invited and made welcome, and you understand that your completion is God's, whose only need is to have you be complete. For your completion makes you his in your awareness. And here it is that you experience yourself as you were created and as you are.
Okay. So in this experience, it is here that you experience yourself as you were created and as you are. Well, tell me more about that experience. So we are talking about the holy instant, the holy encounter. I am a huge fan of the symbol your completion. It's where you are no longer split between a true self and an ego false self. That's a split, a tearing apart. A completion is a union with so that you're a whole and integrated, complete. It involves forgiveness and peace, free of guilt. It involves miracles, holy encounters, holy relationships. It involves feeling a sense of your purpose, of the meaning of love, of your role as part of the sonship. It's a broad idea that has emotional tones to it, psychological impact, and profound spiritual impact. It's a redefinition of what it means to be you, to be complete. Remember, in contrast, the ego wants you to feel like you're lacking in love, like you're missing out, that you're inadequate. Just the opposite of the completion. In the completion, all that nonsense is swept away, and you feel part of something far greater than yourself. It's where you, as he says, you experience yourself as you were created in your original state. And as you always have been, your original state is your eternal state. We know that you can only find that in the present. You can't look forward to it in the future, although there's a tendency to believe that it's in your future. It's available only in the present moment. We'll have a lot more to say about that. Wow, I think that's enough for one session. This is the introduction to what is to come. It's a summation in a short version of something that'll be far more explored. This sense of holy encounters, perfect holy communication, a sense of completion and wholeness. Notice it says this. Let's read it one more time. There is complete forgiveness here, for there's no desire to exclude anyone from your completion, your sense of totality. In sudden recognition, this is where we call it a holy instant. It's a sudden recognition of the value of your brother's part in your completion. And by recognizing that your brother is part of it, it reinforces your own sense of wholeness. All are invited and made welcome. You understand that this completion is not your own, it's God's completion, who always wanted you to feel whole and complete. Another term for this would be a sense of abundance. And in that experience, the meaning of love is made evident. Well, that's as far as we'll go in this session. So rich. What a gift. Somebody said the other day that a lot of this chapter was going over their head. Well, what that means is that these are heavenly ideas that are not a part of your past, are not maybe woven into your emotional fabric or even into your conceptual fabric right now. And so just as we said, at first you have to just, you hear the ideas and maybe repeat them, but they're not yours. And then later on, maybe you read it in a year from now and you're willing to partly accept the idea as true. And with further progress, persistence, and willingness, you're more willing to fully allow for this truth is your truth, until you come into a total acceptance of the truth. It's a progression. And so it's now is the perfect time to begin. Now is the perfect time to keep progressing forward. And so we'll do that together as a group. For did you know that everyone is a part of your completion? And that's where you will find yourself as you were created and as you are. So thank you, brothers and sisters. What a privilege to be able to share, get together around these ideas. The beauty of ideas is that they can be shared. So those ideas, if you're willing, are now yours. And doesn't mean full understanding yet, but it means that the next step towards understanding and appreciation has been taken. And for that, we're blessed. Thank you, Julie, for reading. Thank you all. Look forward to connecting again soon. Namaste.
Namaste. Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Peace and love.
Bye.
Bye. Where is my stop button? Stop.